All right, everyone. We will get started. If I could just ask everyone to mute their own line while they're not talking, that would be #6, and the same code to unmute it. That's #6, and we will get started with this webinar about how to best use CrankWheel for software demos, and also just about how to do effective software demos in general. All right, there's a lot of background noise, so I will mute all lines right now. And just as a reminder, the way to unmute your line if you need to ask a question is to press # and then 6 to unmute your own line. # and then 6. All right. So let's start talking about software demos. So there are obviously various different types of software that you might want to demonstrate. There is web-based software. There is software that is not web-based, which runs in your desktop. And then there are also things you might want around a presentation of software, such as a keynote presentation, or to show an Excel spreadsheet. And I'll show a few examples of that, and I'll show you ways that you can use CrankWheel most effectively to demo different types of software. Okay, thank you to those who just joined us. For those who just joined, to unmute your own line, the code on your phone is #6 in case you need to ask a question. That's #6, and the same code to mute your line again once you're finished. And we're talking about how to do different types of software demos effectively using CrankWheel. And the first thing I'm going to show you is a couple of tricks you can use when you're using CrankWheel to do a demo of web-based software. So when we're using web-based software, typically it is the cleanest approach to show it in a browser tab and to just share that particular browser tab. So if you're familiar with the CrankWheel user interface, that's it. And I'll just go through the basic functions. You can share a browser tab here, program window here, and your full screen here. And I'll start by sharing browser tabs. So what I've actually done, and what I recommend you do, especially if you have very complex software or software that takes a long time to load, is that you pre-populate a browser window with different browser tabs that you're going to be using for the demo. And this will let you switch smoothly between the tabs, and it'll also let you sort of preload the tabs with information that you're going to use during the demo. So for example, in this tab here where I'm editing company, I could have preloaded some information. Now I'm showing CrankWheel, and it's a pretty simple to use product, so there's not as much need for this, but for very complex products there's often a need to do some preparation, and then it's very convenient to have these different tabs ready. And then what you can do, and I'm just going to drag this window over here a little bit so we can also watch the viewer end of what I'm going to show you. So I would be sharing the browser tab, and I might start with this. And then let me connect a viewer, and I'm just going to run the viewer on the same desktop here. Now I know it's going to be slightly confusing to do that, but this is just so that we can see both ends of what's happening on one desktop. So this is the actual window, and the viewer is that window where you see the mouse cursor, the window on the right hand side. Okay, so notice here in the window, browser window where I'm sharing a tab, that the tab I'm sharing has this blue icon to indicate which tab I'm sharing. And notice how when I switch between tabs in my actual window, that does not switch between tabs in the viewer's window down here. The viewer's window sticks on the tab that I'm sharing, the tab with the blue icon on it. So what I can do during the demo is when I've finished talking about this first tab and I need to switch to, let's say, that second tab, I can do this. I can say share browser tab, and then I go to whichever tab I want to show. Let's say it's this one here, and I confirm the tab, and boom, your viewer immediately switches to see that tab. So that's faster if you prepare the demo than actually actually physically going ahead and making changes in your software application, which could take a couple of seconds to load, or as I said, you might need preparation beforehand just to make sure everything works. Now, I'm going to take questions at this point. I've unmuted all of your lines right now. So if you have a question, please feel free to just go for it. You can state your name and then the question. Thank you. Okay, if there aren't any other questions at the moment, then I will go ahead and mute all your lines for now. And I have gone ahead and done that. Oh, hang on, no, I haven't. Okay, now I've muted all lines again. As a reminder, and for the folks who just joined, if you would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute your line at any time. You can do so by pressing hash followed by 6 on your telephone keypad, and the same code hash followed by 6 will also work to mute your line again. So just to keep going, so this is the approach that I recommend when you're doing a demo, especially of a complex web-based software, is to set up the tabs that you're going to be using so that the pages are all preloaded, and then when you want your viewer, which as a reminder is this window on the right hand side, when you want your viewer to see a different tab, that's when you go to CrankWheel, you press Browser tab, you confirm the tab you want to show, and now you're showing it. And in fact, while you are showing one of these tabs, while the viewer is looking at one of these tabs, you could be making adjustments in a different tab because the viewer is only seeing the tab which has the blue spot on it. Okay, so that is very briefly about my recommendation for how to demonstrate web-based software. And as I mentioned, it is cleanest to demonstrate it by using the Browser tab feature. That also gives you the nice green highlight on the mouse cursor on the viewer end, as you can see here. And it also lets you switch between browser tabs in the way that I just showed you. So now let's talk about what to do if you're demonstrating software that lives in a program window, so like natively installed software on your PC or your Mac. Yes, go ahead. Was there a question? No, okay. All right. Let me though just open up for questions very briefly. Any question at this point, feel free to state your name and your question. Great. Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Go ahead and state your question, please. Okay. Yes, thank you for the question, Gina. So I'm going to repeat it just for our recording of the webinar, because the recording only includes my side of the audio. So the question is whether we have made some improvements to the resolution or the quality of graphics that are sent into the CrankWheel session over the last 2 to 3 months, and also to check if we can maybe try some other programs and see if they are working better or as well as what I'm showing you right now. And the answer is that yes, we have made improvements in the last 3 months or so, and we continually make improvements to the graphical quality with a focus on making it appropriate for business applications, so for demonstrations of business software essentially. The other part of that answer to that question is that the quality does depend on the network quality of participants. So when you have someone with a very poor connection, the quality will degrade, and that's done to try to maintain a usable screen share in the face of a very poor connection. So does that answer your question, Gina? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Gina, and please do feel free to email us at support@crankwheel.com if you continue to see problems with quality, because that obviously is something we want to make sure we address, and it might be a special situation. So, okay, thank you very much, and now let's go on to talking about programs that are installed on your computer. So when you're doing a demonstration of programs like that, something that's installed, you would tend to use what we call the program window sharing. So I'll show you how that works. You've probably used it before. Now I'm going to use it to share. Let's see. Well, let's share my soft phone, which I'm using now to dial into the conference. So I click Program Window here, and then I choose the application window, and that causes this application window to be shared to my viewer. And as a reminder, my viewer is down in this window here. Okay. So this is fairly straightforward. It just shows what's happening in the window. As you can probably see here, the quality is reasonably good. You can see a little bit of difference between the two, but it's more or less the same between the actual window and the viewer's side of it. Now, when you're sharing a program window, you will want to think about a couple of things. One is that your viewer's window is likely, the window they're using to view is likely to be typically in this sort of aspect ratio. I'm showing you the window here that I'm moving. Typically in this sort of aspect ratio, unless they're on a mobile, in which case it would be actually typically in the kind of aspect ratio that my soft phone program here has. So keep that in mind when you're demonstrating desktop-based software, to try to, you could try to make the desktop software a similar aspect ratio as their viewer's window is going to be, just to make the best use of their screen real estate. And you can actually sort of tell from the preview pane here on the right-hand side when you're not making great use of their real estate, because if you know they're on a desktop and it's shaped like this, well, that tells you something. When you resize it like this and you see that they can still see everything, you can use the visibility frame as a guideline. So if I do this, for example, I can tell they're only seeing part of what I'm showing them. So keep that in mind when showing desktop programs, that the aspect ratio of the program might make a difference to their experience of the demo. Now, the next thing we'll do, let me actually open up for questions before we go there. I've unmuted everyone, so feel free to state your name and your question if you like. Okay, I guess there are no questions at this time, so we will continue. Let's switch back to... Okay, so everyone's seeing my full screen. Now, let's say I wanted to do a PowerPoint presentation, which is, something you might typically do at the end of a software demo, or even at the beginning, talking about some of the benefits of your software. Now, you might be tempted to share this as a program window. Actually, let me share that to you as a program window. So I'll show you what happens. So. Okay, so you're seeing my PowerPoint screen as a PowerPoint window as a program window. But what happens is when I start sharing my PowerPoint slideshow full screen, I'm going to do that right now. Okay, and what happens on your end is you are not seeing the actual slideshow that I'm showing. You're still seeing either you're seeing nothing, or you're seeing the program window as it was. And the reason for that is that slideshows are always full screen. So to share a slideshow, like a PowerPoint presentation or a keynote presentation, you should always use the full screen functionality. Choose the monitor that it's on. I'm using two different monitors right now. Choose the monitor that it's on, and then share. And then start your full screen presentation. So that's how to do it with PowerPoint or Keynote. Okay. Another thing to note is when you want to use full screen, there are some drawbacks to that. The main one is when you're sharing your full screen, there might be things that appear on the screen or are visible on the screen that might be potentially inappropriate or embarrassing, or it might be just data on other customers. And for example, if I were to share my other screen, you would see potentially a slightly embarrassing dance party going on here in my browser. Oh, sorry. I was going to show you this screen. So my recommendation, if you are going to be sharing full screen some of the time, for example, if you're showing software that uses several different windows, my recommendation is think about having an additional monitor and do the demo on a monitor that is not your primary monitor. That way it's a lot easier to have a clean software demo on that monitor. Okay, let me switch it back to the other screen. A couple of, if there are any questions at this point, go ahead and state your name and question. Okay, so we'll keep on going. So one last thing that I wanted to show you is, it's not a CrankWheel specific thing. It's more about just in general when you're doing software demos. First of all, remember that these are sales meetings. So you should start by qualifying the prospect, figuring out, are they the decision maker? Is it someone else? What does their budget look like? What are their requirements, etc. That should usually be the first couple of minutes on the phone call, and figure out if they are an ideal customer for your business. When you're preparing for the demo, for example, the browser tabs that I showed you that I had set up, when you're preparing for the demo, make sure you have good sample data that's, ideally it should be relevant to that customer's industry, and really know your product very well. The other thing I would say is, when you're doing a demo, start with a fairly brief overview, sort of the briefest nutshell of your product that you can do, and then after that let your customer guide the conversation, because they will be able to tell you what they want to dive into and what they might already understand or might not be interested in, and that'll let you spend the maximum amount of time on the unique selling points of your product that are actually the most appealing to that customer. And of course, always end with an ask. So if it is a sales meeting, this kind of demo call for software or whatever you're doing, it's a sales meeting, so always end with an ask. So ask them what's the next step, or if they're the decision maker, would you like to go ahead and purchase right now? Could be a great ask. So always end by asking them how to proceed. And last thing I wanted to show you is, when it comes to pricing, that discussion on a demo call, the pricing discussion on a demo call, it can be very useful to do something like this. Maybe share a spreadsheet, and I'll just share mine to you. So this is not an actual one that we use, but I sort of modeled it on CrankWheel. So let's say we were in a pricing discussion near the end of a demo call, and the prospect is asking, how much is your product? And then you might say something like, well, before we get into that, how about we take a look at what the value to your business might be for the product? And to do that, it can be useful to have a spreadsheet sort of like this, where you might, let's say I was trying to sell CrankWheel and its instant demo functionality. I might ask the customer or the prospect to estimate for this spreadsheet. Like, let's say, how many website visits do you get per week? They respond, about 3,000. What's the conversion rate from visitor to demo request? They might say, 3%. This is a calculation. And then I might ask, okay, out of those, because here I'm highlighting a unique selling proposition of, a unique selling point of CrankWheel is that, no-shows are less common with instant demos because you can do the demo right away. So I might say, okay, today, how many of those end up as no-shows? Okay, so this results in 72 actual demos. And what's your close rate from demos? They give an estimate. And what's your, lifetime value for a customer? And now we can multiply up and we get sales per year resulting in demos from your website. And then you might say, okay, well, let's look at this with CrankWheel or with your product. The website visitors in the CrankWheel case, they're not going to change. But I might say, okay, well, knowing what you know about our product, do you think it's do you think it's fair that our smart lead capture process might increase the conversion rate from 3% to 4%? And they might say, yeah. And knowing that you can do demos instantly, is it fair to say that, maybe 5% would be no-shows instead of 20%? And they might say yes. And then you might try to convince them that the close rate is going to be 10% instead of 8% because the demo happens right away while they are still interested. And the screen sharing technology is impressive for them to do this right away. Okay, so let's say I convince them to put in these estimates for when it's with CrankWheel, and then I can show them that the sales increase from CrankWheel is almost 100%. The sales increase of sales resulting from demos on your website. So this would be an excellent way to preface the pricing discussion when you've already shown them that in a year they might increase their sales by some significant percentage or reduce their cost or whatever is the unique selling point of your product. So that is my last piece of advice on how to do software demos, is that it can be really good to frame the pricing discussion by first talking about value. And so at this point, I would love to open up for any questions you have at the end of the demo. I'm happy to cover any aspects of CrankWheel that you like. It doesn't have to be tied to what we talked about. So go ahead and state your name and question if you have one, please. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Gina. And I'm just going to restate it for the benefit of folks watching the recording, as the recording only has my end of the audio. So the question is, one way of getting people into a demo is through the so-called instant demos process, where they start from your web page. But what about if you have them already on the phone, and the conversation is going well, and you think, well, hey, I should try to get them into a demo right now. How do you do that? So let's go through that. There are a few different ways. So let's say I'm on the phone with someone right now, and they seem really interested, and I want to do a demo of my software. Then what I would do is I would say, hey, are you in front of a computer, or do you have your smartphone with you? And all I need to know is yes or no, or I need to know, is it smartphone or computer? So what I would do then is I would start sharing using CrankWheel. Sorry, a little glitch with my window here. So I would start sharing using CrankWheel, whatever I like, whether it's the full screen or program window or browser tab. Let's just do browser tab. Okay, and confirm this tab. And now to get someone connected instantly, I can use any of the approaches in this window. One is if I have their mobile phone number, or if they're willing to give it to me, and they have a smartphone, which is more or less everyone in the Western world these days, I can type in their smartphone number and click send to send them a text message. And this text message essentially says, please click this link to view my screen share. And you tell them over the phone, yeah, just click the link and have it open up in your phone's browser. And that gets them immediately connected. So that's the smartest way to do it when you know they're on their smartphone. When you know that they are on in front of a computer, on the other hand, the quickest way usually to do it is what we call the public link. It's this section here. You can ask them to type a simple link, and this is a link you can customize for your company. So you would say, oh, you're in front of a computer. Could you open up a browser window and type in this simple URL for me, or simple link for me, or address, depending on your locality and what you think they might be used to. And by default, the link is meeting.is and then / and then whatever name you've configured for your company. And we can also do custom links, such as if your company was acme.com, you could do meeting.acme.com, or you could do acme.com/meeting. But by default, what you get on all of our paid plans is meeting.is / and then the name of your company. For this company I'm using right now, I have Jói Land. So you ask them to type that in, and then you ask them, oh, and then please just click my photo once that page loads. And the way this page works is it's kind of a reception. It's like a reception lobby. So who's typically in the reception lobby of a small company? It would be, a person who's waiting for someone to join their meeting. So they're picking them up from the reception lobby. So they won't see all of your salespeople here on this page. They'll typically only see you, maybe you and one or two other people, but it's only those people who at this very moment are waiting for someone to join a meeting. So they click your photo as you've asked them to do, and that causes a 2-digit number to be shown to them, and you see the same number down here, and you can accept them based on that number. So if you want to be very paranoid about security, you can wait until they tell you the number. If you aren't, then you can just click accept right away. So that sort of depends on the situation. And now they're connected to your screen share. So that's those are sort of the two fastest ways. The other ways you can do it is you can send them an email with a link to the screen share, or you can copy a link to the screen share if you let's say you have them on an instant messaging application or something like that, or you want to just compose completely your own email. You can copy that link, and that link is going to work immediately. And so all of these three approaches, the text message, sending by email, and copying the link, these are all what we call instant links or public links. So as soon as I type this link into a browser and click OK, it immediately loads the screen share. Whereas the reception lobby kind of thing, which we call the public link, that requires that kind of 1-second authentication. So I hope that answers the question. Now, if anyone else has one final question, I would be happy to take that. Otherwise, then I would just say thank you very much for attending today's webinar on how to do effective software demos with CrankWheel. And I hope you have a very good rest of the day.